Schlep here. Good morning on day 55 of my Appalachian Trail through hike. I am starting the day at mile marker 688, which means I'm going to cross over the 700 mile marker today. Insane. I'm almost a third of the way through. This is flying by so quickly. This week, we're going to talk about budgeting. Aside from the fitness factor that we covered last week, one of the things that seems to stop people from doing the trail most is not having the money to do it. So I've, from a range of friends, seen from very tight budgets to very loose budgets, everybody's out here still having a good time with the right amount of planning in advance and understanding like where your budget lies for different resupplies and Hostel. It is possible to do on a pretty tight budget. So we'll talk to different people and see how they're getting it done. I am coming up to Four Pines Hostel after a 17-mile day. It's right off the trail, a place that's great for people who are trying to be budget conscious. It is only donation based, so you can get a bunk, a hot shower, do your laundry, and take shuttles to town without having to worry about how much you're spending. You give just what you can. Never good to leave without giving anything. These people do work pretty hard to keep it clean and give you what you need. Take a look at the inside. When they're donation based, they're not as fancy as some of the ones like that you pay for, such as Woods Hole, but it has everything that a hiker really needs. A souped up shelter, if you will. These are my new favorite birds, as we learn that they eat ticks, which is like a hiker's biggest nightmare, constantly checking yourself and hoping you don't get limes hanging out in the woods. From the end of March in 2020 through early May 2021, the ATC, or the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, paused handing out hang tags to through hikers and decided that they're not going to recognize the 2,000 milers because they were recommending that people not through hike just due to the safety concerns. However, thousands of people last year and again this year are doing it anyway. Seems to be one of the more safe activities during the pandemic. So being outside and hiking, people were not deterred. And they did just come out saying that with updated government regulations and things starting to loosen up, that they will begin counting miles and passing out hang tags. However, any miles hiked prior to May 11th of 2021 are not counted, which means myself and many fellow through hikers on the trail this year will not go down in the ATC history books as people who have hiked the trail, sadly. But I swear we're out here doing it, unless we're not. And this is just a green screen, and I'm really just locked in someone's basement. You'll never know. Made it to today's high point on the ridgeline, around 3,100 feet, but with the leaves starting to grow in, not much of a view to see. Another question in the Trek survey is why people drop out and don't complete their through hike. And running out of money and budget is actually a big percentage. So hopefully some of these tips help you figure out what you need to plan for and the range to expect so that something like money isn't what takes you off trail. 700 miles and counting. This is kind of freaky. Not much margin for error. After hiking 700 miles, we've apparently amassed the skills to climb over Dragon Tooth. See how this goes. No kidding. I went from 3 miles an hour down to 1 mile an hour for the last 3 miles. It was fun, but tough. The first rhododendron I've seen actually bloomed. I think today's May 8th. The green canopy has loaded at like 45%. View from the top of McAfee Knob. The Tinker Cliffs are just as crazy as McAfee Knob, but a lot less day hikers. What is black and 4 feet and a really good reason not to stay in the shelter tonight?
Schlep.
Sleeping in the shelter is going to be less easy knowing these guys hang out.
I was thinking about it when I was like 7.
I made it to Lambert's campsite for tonight, doing both the McAfee Knob and Tinker Cliffs. That completes the Triple Crown. So across 2 days, it went Dragon's Tooth, McAfee, and Tinker Cliff, which all were beautiful, definitely more technical hiking and a little steeper terrain than I've been used to. So at first, I thought just Georgia was the training ground, but it seemed like the South in general was more getting your legs going for the AT. And now as we go north, the hiking will get a little more complicated. It's certainly a lot more fun. It's beautiful. It's something different than just walking down, the ups and downs of a dirt path, but it does take more time. So I'm going to have to consider that in my pacing moving forward. I am gearing up for just a 10-mile hike today, going to Nero into Roanoke. So we'll head to Daleville, actually get an Uber from there. This is one of the bigger cities along the trail, so access to things like Uber instead of having to hitch will be really nice. Shout out to my trail friend, Tater Tot's friend, Hannah, who is opening up her house in Roanoke, as well as her backyard for tenting, for thru hikers to come through. Really cool trail magic opportunity, especially for hikers on a budget, a place that you can go stay for free, take a shower, do your laundry without having to pay for a hostel, and get to hang out with some cool friends. Will caveat though that even though it's a free stay, going into town usually gets expensive. You end up dropping coin at restaurants and on different activities. So you still have to watch what you're doing. But yeah, it's always amazing when trail magic like this comes up. I know myself and a lot of the other thru hikers are very grateful to Hannah for letting us come hang. All kinds of pretty flowers are starting to bloom with the green. A chopper is pulling somebody out. Kind of crazy. Some ominous clouds above it. Roanoke was a great time, hanging out at Hannah's place, doing a spaghetti dinner, having a party where thru hikers slowly collected throughout the night until we packed the house was really cool. Ended up spending most of yesterday in the city itself. Got to go to brunch, do a wine tasting, check out a pinball museum, some other fun things. It was nice to kind of feel like a person again that lives like in a city instead of just being in the woods. However, last night, just before sunset, we hiked in a few miles to get back into the woods, making sure we got a full day today to get some hiking in, and it felt really good to be back out here. So I'm realizing more and more that I'm enjoying just like the outdoors. So even though taking a break is nice, getting back out here felt even better. The trail has been following the Blue Ridge Parkway today, which is awesome because it means that there's a lot of trash cans along the way and great views and picnic tables. And things like picnic tables and garbage cans are really nice when you're used to none. The biggest cost of doing the trail is definitely the opportunity cost. Taking 6 months out of your life to do this is quite a bit of time, and that's also time that you're not working and earning money. So you're spending, but actually you have no cash flow coming in, you're not adding to any of your investments or savings. If this is something you love or really want to do, it's definitely worth it. I would just say be careful of the sunk cost fallacy, and if you do get out here and you're not enjoying it, don't feel like you're stuck in it if your time could be better spent off trail, or doing something else with your 6 months to make sure that your time and money are not wasted. Each section of the Appalachian Trail is maintained by volunteer trail clubs. So it's cool. Sometimes we get to meet them along the trail when they're doing work like cleaning up down trees and have an opportunity to thank them. Over lunch, I reviewed my online banking to check out my expenses over the last 2 months and give you an idea of what a resupply looks like as well as a stay in town. The resupply was pretty straightforward. I would say on average I'm spending about $70 on 5 days of food. I'll caveat that you spend a little different amount based on where you are. If you're at a place like the Knock or Fontana Dam, you're going to spend a lot more because you're resupplying at a resort versus if you're at an actual grocery store where it's more reasonable. Also, the kind of food that I'm buying, on one hand, I try to go for the healthier stuff in terms of like using RX bars and LAR bars and Kind bars versus like Chewy bars or the store brand to get something a little more healthy in me. But on the flip side of that, since I can't taste, I don't really care about flavor, so I can buy whatever is on sale. And when it comes to dinners, I'm fine with endlessly eating, Knorrs, potatoes, and stovetop. I'm not really spending money on those freeze-dried meals, which people who can taste or people who are foodies and need some variety are buying, and it's like an 88-cent Knorr versus a $10 freeze-dried meal. So that also can make a difference for your food budget. For lodging, it's really hard to tell a story of what the average is because I'm looking and there was one night where I spent $12 on a campsite, but yet I had access to the shower and the toilets and the Wi-Fi and doing laundry and hanging out at the hostel and the bonfire, and it was everything I needed versus spending $75 one night on a hotel room that was like disgusting. Like I felt grosser leaving it than when I got there. So there's a huge range from free to a cheap tent site to paying for a bunk to splitting a room or getting your own hotel room. It is so choose your own adventure, and hard to give you a frame of reference. Although I suppose a campsite on the low end is like $10 to $20, whereas a hotel room, as you can imagine, goes anywhere from like $50 to hundreds of dollars, depending on what you're getting. Can also say that I've heard from other people's research and what other people have spent on trail that you spend about 2/3 of your budget the second half of the hike, just because the south tends to be a lot less expensive, and there's a more dense hiking community as not many people have fallen off yet in the south, so there's a lot more offering like hostels, and as you go north you're more likely to be staying in hotels and motels, and they can get kind of expensive. So plan for that, and pace out your budget if you're trying to see what you can spend over the months for food and your resupplies. Uphill. 3 mountains or so with little dips in between, slowly going up. Gonna be a hot day. I think I'm gonna shoot for about 17 miles to get me to the third shelter down the way. I'm stalling at the base of the first climb. Hanging out at this pretty beach before all the sweating begins. Today is no joke. My calves are on fire from the constant incline. On the plus side, the leaves are so filled in that not much sun is getting through, so although my muscles are feeling it, I'm actually not that sweaty. One climb down and two to go, stopping at this awesome shelter for lunch, right next to a stream. The shelter itself is absolutely huge. It looks like a tree house almost. There's like a first floor, actual windows in it, block out some of the wind, and then a ladder that you can take up to a second floor. So it sleeps about 20, plus has this covered porch. Really cool spot. Also your classic fire ring, picnic table, privy off to the side. I'm bummed that I found this during the day and didn't stay here last night. Back at it. 2 more big climbs today to the next shelter. Made it to the top of the last peak of the day. You can see all the Blue Ridge views. Hello, downhill. How I've missed you. I made it to the shelter after a tough 17 miles. Excuse me while I go sleep like a baby. I am headed out for the day to celebrate 2 months on trail with a 22-mile day that is mostly downhill, which is so welcomed after yesterday. The Trek puts out statistics every year based on a survey that they do to show what people spent on their thru hike, both the gear getting ready for it as well as on the hike itself. The gear getting ready for it in 2019 looked like people averaged $1,000 to $2,000, but there were also some outliers of people who spent a lot more or less. I think part of this has to do with maybe how much gear you already have, things that you're able to borrow or rent versus people who need to buy things new. As somebody who didn't have any gear and I didn't really have any friends that backpack to borrow things from, my budget needed to be a little bit higher. However, at this point, I know that there's some things that I did not need to spend, full price or like get the best of the best for. Things like a pack cover is kind of useless, like use a trash bag, little swaps like that. So I think I could have spent a little less than I did, but know that the $2,000 tops average is probably low if you don't have anything to start with, but that you can be crafty and get that number down if you need to. For what people spent on the hike, there isn't really an average. It's a pretty drastic difference, and it really depends on how you're hiking. You could get away with like $1,000 a month if you're somebody who maybe every 5 or 6 days stays at a hotel or hostel, resupplies when you're in town doing some activities and eating. You can also do it for a lot less if you're somebody who goes into town less, doesn't spend as much money at restaurants, and focuses on going to places where they can either split rooms with people or stay at the places like Four Pines where it's donation based, so you're not spending as much on a room. Opposite end of the spectrum, something called platinum blazing, or in between platinum blazing and a normal hike. You can stay at hotels or hostels much more often, end up spending a lot more money in town. So it really just depends on how you hike, what your preferences are, and really what your budget is. So there's ways to make it work. Regardless of what your budget is, but it will affect, the amount of time that you're spending in town versus hanging out in the woods and sleeping in your tent versus a bed. A few last budget line items to consider if you're mapping out what you might need to spend for your hike are things like health insurance. If you're not going to be getting it through your employer or your family, there's options like travel insurance or Obamacare type insurance. Other things are monthly subscription. So if you subscribe to a news outlet or other content like music or video, trying to think about what you want to keep and what you want to cancel. Also consider how mad your friends will be if you cancel ones that they use your password for. And finally, additional gear on trail. So you've watched me go through 3 Sawyers, so I'm constantly replacing my water filter. Shoes, I would say, have been one of the biggest expenses. They last about 500 miles. So with a 2,200-mile hike, you can assume that you're getting at least 4 pairs of shoes. I've seen some last a little longer, and other people's go to crap really quickly. So definitely need to be prepared with a budget to buy new or replace some gear, and consider what your current expenses are and what you can cut out or not. My last expense, I would say, is this Garmin InReach. You purchase the device itself, but then it also has a monthly subscription attached to it. I would say a solid 50% or so of people that I've seen on trail have some kind of satellite device for texting, tracking, SOS, but the half that don't also seem to be just fine. So figure out what you need for your hike, and consider all of that when putting together your budget. I'm coming up on the bridge over James River. It's the longest footbridge on the AT. The end of the bridge will mark the end of the downhill climb for today. I'll have a couple thousand feet climb to end the day, and camp on top of Little Rocky Row. Coming up to the lookout that makes yesterday's climb worth it. Wow. These Virginia views. Pretty killer. So green. I am ending this week here, day 61 at mile 762. Looking forward to next week, both hitting the 800-mile marker as well as entering the Shenandoahs, which are supposed to be beautiful. You can subscribe to my channel for weekly updates and let me know in the comments if you have any questions.